in this world of networks and communities, one of the more powerful and important actors are social movements. And we in the last number of years and in the contemporary times are seeing social movements that are amplified or organized around the digital platforms. So they either get the message out more efficiently and effectively to larger groups who can then coalesce and either work virtually or actually get together as human beings in the same time and same space. So there's large marches in Washington, marches in New York, protests, occupations, whatever. A mix of people being people who might not otherwise know how to find each other in old times getting together. And then some just live virtually. I mean, we have movements online that have no face time at all. But the role of social movements isn't new. I mean, most of the social policy and economic policy we have today, you can trace back 100, 150 years to initial social movements, the anti-slavery movement, the suffragettes, or first the enfranchisement movement to take the franchise and extend it to people other than elites, to the general population, and then the suffragette movement.
That's a very interesting question because it goes to the heart, if you like, of almost a disciplinary distinction between the study of public policy and policy analysis by political scientists and the study of those processes by sociologists. It's very much an article of faith, I think, amongst political scientists that people don't count until they're organised. And a social movement is, of course, a very loose kind of organisation. Often social movements resist traditional organisational structures. They resist having designated spokespeople. They resist having offices and presidents and executive directors and all of those other kinds of things. On the other hand, the sociologists, of course, have reminded us that in recent years, particularly social media and other kinds of new communication technologies, have made social movements much more powerful in the sense of being able to communicate a message and to provide at least the impression that large numbers of people are concerned about an issue, and that people need to be paying attention to what the social movement is saying. I don't think this dispute between the disciplines is ever going to be resolved. Social movements, sociologists, I think, will often, from my political science point of view, tend to overestimate the power of social movements to influence public policy in a distinct way, whereas a sociologist would almost certainly say that I am underestimating the power of contemporary social movements. From my point of view, the problem with social movements comes when you get past the idea of putting something on the policy agenda. That's what social movements are really good at. They can raise awareness. They can create what we call in the literature focusing events, by causing large numbers of people to gather in a particular place at a particular time. That's so much easier to organise now. They can influence decision makers so much more easily in the old day than the old days when you had to write a letter or pick up the telephone or something of that kind. In all of these ways, I think social movements can raise the profile of a particular issue or a particular orientation towards an issue. But the problem, as we've seen time and time again, is that once the issue moves inside the policy community or into the policy network, then social movements are much less effective unless they have themselves representatives within the policy network or the policy community, and that those representatives are in some way empowered to speak for the social movement, which social movements resist all the time. And it's a constant source of frustration for policymakers. Who should I be talking to in this social movement? And then the social movement people say, well, we don't operate like that. We don't have a hierarchy. We don't have someone we've empowered to speak and report back to us, and these sorts of things. So once you're inside the policy community and the policy network, the influence of the social movement is so much more diffuse. And so when you actually get to the point where options are being considered and assessed against various criteria, and those criteria are being chosen, which, as we'll see, how you choose the criteria and how you weight them and so on, has a huge impact on the outcome of policy analysis. Social movements have almost no influence at all, and it's a problem. It's a problem of matching the way policy communities operate with the way social movements operate.
All the in our British parliamentary world, most of the poor laws and the sense of the role of the state in protecting and nurturing the citizen and the family emerged in the 1840s and 1850s in Britain, where you had the Industrial Revolution and children were being abused by modern day terms. They were working in mines at age 7 or 8 because they were small. They didn't need to make the mine shafts as big. And they were being treated like they were animals. And those social movements, which were movements, it wasn't somebody at the top said we should change this. These were mass movements that people were motivated by their values and sometimes their interests to push for change. The whole Gomperism and cooperatives was another social movement that had major effect in parts of Canada, in Quebec and Saskatchewan, and in certain sectors like agriculture and finance. They were powerful drivers for creating a different policy space than we would have otherwise had. The whole labor movement has been critical to improving workplace safety, improving the quality and impact of our workaday world, and up to and including things like social welfare and pensions and all the things that we now value as products of an advanced industrial economy came from social movements. Even the healthcare movement was in many ways not a top-down direction. It wasn't as mass as some people, it wasn't as mass an effort as some of the other things like push in the 1930s for relief in the Depression. But it was more local and regional, tinkering and people actually subsuming their personal interests in something bigger than just what's in it for me. They were trying to improve their community context and the society they lived in. And so social movements they are at the root of our policy space. I don't think governments would be nearly as enlightened and accepted and valuable today if we hadn't had social movements that pushed, prodded, proposed, threatened, did all kinds of things. They often framed out the problems, they framed out the options, they advocated, they sometimes ahead of government went out and implemented. They said, you're too slow, you're not coming fast enough, we're going to implement this in our space. So the co-ops moved into a lot of social policy, and in the Robert Owen, Neuchâtel stuff, they beta tested a lot of public policy. In Saskatchewan, public health care in North America was beta tested in places like Swift Current, where the community said, we can't wait for you people to get your act together. We're going to try something different. We're going to try something that we think could work for everybody. Sort of a generalized insurance style, publicly provided or at least collectively provided healthcare system rather than just a doctor-patient relationship. And so most of the things we really value in the 21st century came out of movements. The environmental movement, the people like Rachel Carson and Silent Spring were powerful triggers, but nothing would have happened if citizens in North America and in Europe hadn't said, enough. We don't want our rivers burning. We don't want our national icon, the bald eagle, to die because of pesticide use. And so we created institutions like the EPA. That wasn't somebody who thought, hey, that we've got a problem, we've got to fix it. That was pushed by a social movement, the environmental movement. And of course that we're seeing that migrate into a whole variety of other citizen and consumer and social advocacy groups. Our churches have advocated for a lot more enlightened policies within many of our states. So, getting rid of capital punishment, dealing with, treating people who commit crimes not as evil, but as people who can be can be redeemed and assisted to live a non-criminal lifestyle. You go down the list, there's not much that you can't, very little of that was government doing for us. Mostly it was government finally getting the message and saying, oh, we can help you. We can help generalize and extend and finance and organize, because there's a limit to bottom-up organization. It does break down because there's common pool problems. There's all kinds of issues about scaling up from local to global in terms of impacts.
Of course, there's always the question about the representativeness of social movements. Should I be paying attention to a noisy social movement? Is it a bunch of people who are manipulating Twitter, or does it actually represent a groundswell of opinion that the people I'm advising need to pay serious attention to? We know that organizations, be they corporations, be they social activists or whoever, have techniques for trying to make themselves appear more representative of public opinion than they actually are. And those techniques have translated very easily into the world of social media. So it becomes a significant problem when you think about the representativeness of opinions that are being expressed by social movements. But on the other hand, there is a very significant issue in public policy making, which we've been aware of now for a very long time as one of the downsides of policy communities. And that's what's known in the literature as the wrong problem. And policy communities, because they exist of people who live in the same kind of world, who have basically the same kind of experiences, often went to the same kind of schools, did the same kind of degrees, they're insulated from the world that their policies affect.
In the world of active, engaged social movements, this meso level of interested actors who are not just lobbing ideas out and then walking away, but are actively promoting and defining what alternatives the state might consider, the role of the policy analyst has changed a lot. In my day, when I started back in the 1980s, the analysts sat in the ivory towers of their buildings or in the basements. They were a think tank. They were cocooned and isolated. They might occasionally look at the media, but generally they read journal articles, they ran models, they manipulated data. They had very little connection to people outside of the ministries. They were isolated because we were in that Weberian world of hierarchy, and the analyst's job was to inform the minister. But as the problems diffused, as the competencies and capacities spread more widely, as university faculty, as think tanks emerged that had really good information, the transmission of those people going to a minister and it trickling down to the official was too slow and cumbersome and not very effective. Quite often it came down in distorted ways. So increasingly you started to see analysts move out and start engaging with others. So instead of doing primary scholarly and analytical work inside the ministries, they became more issues management people. So the skill sets have evolved. When I emerged, people were hiring economists and accountants and business types and political scientists as policy analysts. Now increasingly they're looking for public policy administration types, MPA types, because while they may not be an expert in any one technique, they have a toolkit that allows them to go out and assess, gather, engage, bring back, and put together this disparate set of pressures and interests and options into a way that the policy system can analyze it and use it. And so the job of an analyst has changed a lot in this networked and community-based world. It's no longer we do for them and we pass it up the chain and the government decrees and implements and they're just repositories or targets for our policy measures. Now it's a partnership. It's become much more horizontal. So at all levels of government now, it's very porous, not only within and between departments, but between governments and non-government actors, that people are out talking and listening and understanding and collaborating. So you're getting a lot more exchange of data, exchange of personnel,